Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible Home to Duns. Today we're in Proverbs chapter 29, so let's get started.
Okay, so when I was looking over Proverbs chapter 29, I'm looking for, now I recognize that all these Proverbs are basically written, like remember when you were in school and you were learning poetry in school? So there's a such thing as a couplet, okay? So just a couple of lines that go together. Most of the Proverbs are going to do this. So when I just asked Jax, I said, hey buddy, what, help me out a little bit. What was this chapter about? He said, it's just a bunch of Proverbs. And that's true. But here's what you're also going to find is that even in the grouping of these seemingly very different Proverbs, there are a series of themes that kind of connect together. For instance, if we went back to the last chapter, remember yesterday it was me and John and Jeb, and we talked about how Solomon is winding down the book of Proverbs talking about the behavior of a king. Sometimes they do right, sometimes they do evil, sometimes they're wise, sometimes they're foolish. And he's doing all of this because as he's winding down Proverbs, he recognizes that even the king doesn't get to live forever. And he's got a son named Rehoboam who's going to take the throne. And what he may be worried about is that he sees a lot out of his son. We don't know how many kids Solomon had, but I guarantee you, with 700 wives and 300 concubines, he had a lot of kids. So Rehoboam was no slouch, okay? He was above out of all the other kids that Solomon had. He was the guy. And yet what Solomon was seeing was there was a danger lurking there. And so now by the time you get to chapter 9, let me tell you, chapter 29, here's what you're finding. You're finding the internal side, the inside of a man. Now we're talking about his heart. We're talking about paranoia. We're talking about discipline. We're talking about ego. We're talking about confession. We're talking about wickedness. We're talking about pride. So he's hitting all of those things. Those are things you don't see on the outside. It's not like growing a third eye on your head or another arm. Anybody catch that. But how difficult is it to know if there's pride or ego or greed or selfish ambition, vainglory, or conceit in a man's heart? Now, there are ways to figure it out. You just watch. But they're not easily recognizable if you just took a picture of them. You just look at a picture and you go, oh, that guy's dealing with pride. No, you don't really do that. You got to watch how they listen and how they talk. So look in verse number 1. So in chapter 29, verse 1, it says this. It says, he who is often rebuked, okay? That means disciplined. He is corrected. And hardens his neck. Now here's what that means. That means that if you ever got on to somebody and they just kind of, that's stubbornness. Okay, so he who is often corrected and hardens his neck, he responds with stubbornness, will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. Now let me give you an example of that. So when we finish reading the book of Proverbs, if you looked ahead a little bit, you know this. So in the book of Proverbs, when we finish out next Monday by reading chapter 31, the next day we're going to start the book of 2 Kings. 2 Kings is an explanation of the era of the rise and fall of the Israelite kinghood. Most of the men you're going to read about who live and rule the nation of Israel, the Bible says this. It says, and they did wicked in the eyes of the Lord. By the end of the book, the whole nation is destroyed and the people are carried into exile. Daniel and Ezekiel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they all go in there. You say, well, man, they must have had a run of bad luck. No. God had been warning his people for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. He who is often rebuked and hardens his neck, just gets stubborn. Here's how it ends. Will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. So that verse is going to be what happens in 2 Kings. That's how all of this kind of fits in together. Now, Jackson, what'd you get out of this?
Okay, so my takeaway comes from verse 6. I'm going to read it real quick. It says, an evil person is caught by sin, but the righteous one sings and rejoices. Now, if you look at that verse, and then you take a look at the world today, then you might find that it doesn't really line up, because you see a lot of people who are super rich, and they have a lot of power, and they're just not great people. And then you'll find homeless people on the side of the road, and they love Jesus. They have a relationship with him, but they're just having a tough time on earth. And so that's kind of hard to read that and then look at the world. But we got to remember, we got to take into account, like, this world is not all there is, and after this, there's heaven and hell, and so because the righteous people, we kind of struggle here. We're told we're going to have hard lives as followers of Christ, but we're promised eternal life and paradise with Jesus Christ. And those people, no matter how much they like succeeded in life on earth, if they didn't have a relationship with God, then their sins are going to condemn them to hell. And so that's kind of where that verse comes in. Also, you gotta understand the word righteous. Like the New Testament tells us, there is none righteous, no, not one. And so you got to be like, oh, okay, well, we're all going to hell, which we are. But that would be the case if it weren't for Jesus, who paid the price for all of us, and so he covered us with his blood. And so now when God sees us, we're no longer the evil person. We are the righteous ones. And so because of that, it says, but the righteous one sings and rejoices. And we don't sing and rejoice just because we're happy. We sing and rejoice because we're grateful to God for what he's given us.
Okay. And we sing and rejoice even when we're not happy, right?
That's right.
Because it's not about our feelings. It's about the one we've put our faith in. I think you're right on target. So I think the way I want to end today, which was my big takeaway from today, it was an odd verse. Look in verse 24. It says, whoever is a partner with a thief hates his own life. He who swears to tell the truth, but he reveals nothing. So the thing I got out of that, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, was the fact that it is entirely possible for a person to know what is right and not do it. Not only to know what's not right and willingly go the other way, but it's a sin to know the right thing and then willingly do the wrong thing. That's a sin. So if I know I'm not supposed to tell a lie, but I tell a lie anyway, well, that's a sin. But when I know something is right and I just fail to do anything with it, okay? So he who knows to do right but does it not, to him it is sin. So if I know something is right and I don't do it, I just neglect it. It's not like I went the other direction. I just did nothing. Still wrong. If I know something is wrong and I don't stand up for it, also wrong. And so, like the book of Leviticus, chapter 5 says this: if a person sins in hearing the utterance of an oath, and is a witness whether he has seen or knows a matter, if he does not tell it, he bears guilt. So he says even if you've heard but you fail to stand up for what is right and what's true and what's good, he says your lack of doing anything is going to come back and bite you. So years ago, a guy named Edward Burke, he says it like this. He said, evil succeeds when good men do nothing. Well, listen, I want to be a good man. I want you to be a good man. Sometimes being a good man means not doing what we know we shouldn't be doing. That's obvious. But other times it means doing something even if nobody else is willing to do it. So I wrote this in my notes, that it is possible to be part of something wrong by being passive in it and not doing. I can be part of something wrong by not being part of something that's right. I can be part of something wrong if I just let it go. Okay? So, there's a perfect illustration for this, by the way. So Jesus tells a story of a man who travels from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And on that trip, what happens? He falls among thieves. Well, right here. Whoever is partner with a thief hates his own life. He swears to tell the truth, but he reveals nothing. So the man is traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he falls among thieves. They beat him up, they rob him, they leave him for half dead. Two men come along, one a priest and one a Levite, probably on their way home from serving in the temple. Their shift is ended, and they're ready to just go home. And they see the man laying on the side of the road. They don't know if he's living, they don't know if he's dead. They do kind of look. But both of them end up just walking away and just leaving the guy still laying there in the gutter. Now, did they beat the guy up? No. Did they rob him? No. But did they help him? No. Next, you have a Samaritan, a good Samaritan, who travels along the road. He sees the guy. He picks him up. He puts him on a donkey, the one that he was riding. He puts him on a donkey. He takes him to a village. He pays for the guy to have room and board and medicine and physical help until he's back up on his feet. He said, listen, and if it costs any more, I'll pay for it. Let's just get this guy in a better place. So, he did something. He said, I'm not a doctor, but I can pay for one. He said, I'm not a strong man, but I can let you ride my donkey. So here's what he does. He knew his limitations, but he did something. I'm telling you, there's something you need to be doing. And we do wrong if we do nothing. We will get ourselves into trouble as much by negligence as we will willful disobedience. So whatever it is, engage and do the right thing. Be wise. All right. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter number 30. See you then.
Bye.